So this recipe for a Krentenbollen, which means currant buns, was given to me by my mom a few years ago, and I've made it several times, and I really like it has a very unique flavor due to the orange zest and lemon zest. So I'll go through the ingredients: 1 cup of currants, 1 cup of raisins, half a teaspoon of orange zest and half a teaspoon of lemon zest, 1 large egg, 3 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of warm milk, 2 tablespoons of softened butter, and 2 teaspoons of yeast. And I also used a second egg for an egg wash on the buns at the end before baking. So the first thing you want to do is heat up your milk just to warm it up. So 45 seconds on high in my microwave does the job. And I give it a quick stir, and I'm just going to check the temperature. So anytime you're warming up milk, you don't want to be above 40 degrees Celsius. You don't want to kill your yeast, so we're right in that range, under 40. And that'll kind of kickstart your yeast for the first rise. So we'll add our dry ingredients first. Our flour, yeast, sugar and salt. And we'll give that a quick stir with the whisk. So I wouldn't say this recipe is very difficult. It's just a little bit time consuming with the forming of the buns and several rises and a fair amount of ingredients. But the addition of the zest and the different flavor of currants as opposed to raisins, it gives us a very unique flavor. So I really do like these buns. So yeah, we've added our zest. We're going to add our warm milk and kind of the rest of the liquidy ingredients. Softened butter, and I use a dough whisk to incorporate all the ingredients together. I don't use a stand mixer for most of my baking. This only takes about a minute really of incorporating the wet and dry ingredients. But yeah, these Danish dough whisks are a good investment. They're not very expensive, and they're a good investment. So as you mix it, it becomes a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more effort. Now, I didn't have a full cup of currants. I had about 3/4 of a cup, so I substituted some dried cranberries. So you'll see a little bit later when we add the currants, you'll see a bit of red in there, and that's just because I didn't have a full cup of currants. So I don't typically have currants on hand, and they're not that easy to find in the stores, to be honest with you, around here. But if you look hard enough, that you can find them, but they're just not commonly available, I would say. Okay, so we're just kind of give it a little bit of a mix together and push it into the center. And we're going to cover that and put it in a warm area. So our stove has a proofing cycle, so the fan runs occasionally, and there's a heating element, so it's kind of just imitates having the oven light on. But yeah, pick a warm area and just let this rest for about 30 minutes. It doesn't really rise that much. It's just kind of to let it rest, I think. Okay, so just give it a couple of turns. It's a little bit easier to work with after 30 minutes. I think that's the main key for that time. And there you can see some of the dried cranberries and the currants together. And this dough is not a very wet dough, so it's kind of, I would say, a bit of a challenge to get the currants and the raisins mixed into the dough. You really have to kind of work it for a while. But the next rise in a warm area is for 45 minutes, so then the dough becomes easier to work with. But yeah, just kind of keep punching it and pressing in, and eventually everything comes together. If you wanted to, you could work this dough on a work surface or a counter, but this is such a large bowl, like it kind of is easy to punch it down inside the bowl, so whatever works for you. And actually the dried cranberries work pretty well as a substitute for currants, so if you have an issue trying to find them, you could always use dried cranberries. Maybe cut them in smaller pieces because they can be quite large sometimes. So you place in a warm area for 45 minutes, and in the meantime you prepare your baking sheet. We're going to make 12 buns or rolls, so they will fit on a standard sheet. So this is just a anti-stick mixture that I make out of flour, oil, and vegetable shortening. There's a separate video on how to make that. But you could also use parchment paper or a greased pan. I like this mixture because everything just comes right off. Nothing ever sticks. So, and also you can flour a work surface. And we're going to make the buns. They're actually rolls. They're kind of in between the size of a roll and a bun. You could make them smaller. These are kind of medium-sized rolls, I would say. Okay, so this dough is a little bit easier to work with now. You're still going to have a few trying to escape, but you'll see at the end I just place them on top of the rolls and use an egg wash to kind of glue them on top. So just work the dough for 30 seconds or so and get it into a round shape because we're going to be cutting this into 12 pieces. And then I just use a bench scraper to first cut it in half. And then you set one half off to the side and just make this into a somewhat of a round ball and flatten it down a bit because you're going to make some more cuts. Still having a challenging time trying to get these raisins and currants to stay within the dough, but and then I cut this into 3, and then those 3 I cut in half again, which gives me 6. Now if you wanted to, you could weigh out each of the individual 12 buns and have them exactly the same, but I never do that, and I don't care for doing that. But if you want everything uniform, you can definitely weigh out each one, make sure they're all the same. But I think they look nicer when they're slightly different. And the next step is to form each one into a little round ball and then flatten each one out and then place them on our sheet pan. So I'm going to speed up the video a little bit. And don't worry if they, give them an inch or so in between the buns, and they will stick together once they do the second rise. But don't worry about that. You can always just pull them apart. But they all do fit on one pan, so which is good. And here you see at the end I'm left over with a few escapees, so I put them on top, and you'll see later I use the egg wash, which is kind of almost mandatory for Krentenbollen because they have to have that nice shiny browned appearance. But anyway, it almost acts like a glue, and it keeps the few extra raisins and currants on top. But you don't have to do that either. You can just be satisfied with what's inside. So yeah, you want to let that rise in a warm area. I did an hour and a half, seemed appropriate for me. Every area is a little bit different on how warm it is, but you can see they've risen fairly nicely. So again, they're in between a roll and a bun size. So if you wanted them smaller, you'd obviously do 2 sheet pans and make them a little bit smaller. But I think this is a good size. And in the meantime, you want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 Celsius. This doesn't take long to add the egg wash. So Krentenbollen are typically served with just butter, but often people have like a nice sliced Dutch cheese. You could even melt the cheese if you want, but yeah. So definitely a unique flavor with the currant and the slight citrus bitterness. It doesn't taste like regular raisin bread. It's a nice taste. So in they go, 400 for 20 minutes. So you can check it at 15 minutes, they'll be brown, but they you want to almost give them that full 20 minutes to make sure they're cooked inside. But you'll see this is after 20 minutes, and they have that nice shiny brown appearance. And they smell fabulous too when they're cooking. The whole house smells great. You have that kind of orange peel, lemon peel smell along with baked bread and the raisins, and it smells great. So you can see they just slide right off, so that mixture really works well for non-stick. And you want to let these cool down, probably I would say 20 to 30 minutes. But they are nice to have after 20 minutes when they're nice and warm too. So. I'll just slice one open to show you the inside. So these are nice to serve during the holidays too. They look nice on a plate, and they're not very filling, but they have a lot of flavor. So I encourage you to give these a try. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. Please subscribe, and bye for now.